What's going on, folks? It's Kid Shardy Gaming Nation in the building. You feel me? Get up in here, cock your feet up. You know what I'm saying? We're gonna get this shit started. Give me 1 sec while I get some tunes.
Pussy them feel like work and done. Hey, this isn't just a ta-ta-ta-ta-ta. Make you pray to Allah, the thing sing sha-la-la-la-la-la-la. And I miss Kitty at the city me a cha. Them the sata, them a big tabata. Why are them afraid of me war? You can't talking at the tongue to me car. Me a me glapper. Bumbo old man is circle your yard. Where I yard a bra. So when you come attack ya.
Yo, big up Movado. What people don't understand and realize is that Movado is truly a god in dancehall because Movado changed the game of a lot of dancehall artists, right? In dancehall reggae, when it comes to people like Vibes Cartel and Bone Killer, they used to be rapid fire lyrics. Movado came into the game as a sing J, and at the same time, he was a clash artist. He was a warrior artist in the dancehall, and then changed the game. This is why in dancehall you see everybody doing singing and having their melody mixed in with the lyrics. It's because Movado influenced that. You know what I'm saying? So we have to give respect to Movado. I understand. But let's keep it going.
You better watch all the talk when you make. Hey, talk up pussy. All them a talk, them soft me a bully. Boy shoulda know, see the rifle ya fully. Grab out your brain from your head like fully. Grand spend gully, cassava piece gully. Love the war like coolie, love curry. Tony place dark when it bright and sunny. 100 rifle, 1 bag of money. M16 turn him in a nowadays mommy. Run up in a me gun, it turn you in a crash dummy. Gully come down and left the place bloody. Can't see ya but don't know a playboy bunny. Yeah, me know them afraid of me. Walk with the AK to the favor me. Spanish town and mobile, we no see a body. Walk out and murder them fatally. Both say them bad and them not do what. Him go sing fear by cold chain and ring. The chopper, the Gatling weapon and twin. Squeezing knife face and watch the head spin. This isn't just a ta-ta-ta-ta-ta. Make you pray to Allah, the thing sing sha-la-la-la-la-la-la. And I miss Kitty at the sweetie me a cha. Them just a ta, them a big tabata. Why are they afraid of me war? You can't talking at the tongue to me car. Me a big lapper. Think it over, war no over. 6 rifle circle them ends like a soldier. If it's not a froth up like soda. Pussy coulda guard up full of order. Red light me pointy 9 chest. Pussy that coulda have a 99 vest. Squeeze up the chica, turn it in a wild west. Me love see funeral, me love see dead chest. When you see me, you see evil a walk in a flesh. Run for your life or you calm or you get. Them things that me cool are the warm me get. Check your forecast of this time where you met. Cha-la-la. Make you pray to Allah, you think sing la 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 la. And I miss Kitty, you just pity me a job. Them just a time, them a big tabata.
Yo, Movado, yo, his vocals is wicked, bro. This song I'm about to play from Movado is like Movado saying, "Yo, I'm gonna be me. Fuck what y'all thinking." You know what I'm saying?
Make me clean again, clean again.
Gully. For me haters them. For me flaws them me don't sorry. Who the dead in the darkness, nobody. Only the Father above it that watch over me. Me get a chance and me make life globally. No sorry. Forgive me haters when I have to see me carry on. I wanna pussy make the gully have to carry on. Where do the grades go when you sleep at night? Upwards we tilting to make future bright. Don't make excuses, we make sacrifice. Try to do good, end up bad, such is life. Them see the Louis and the Benz outside. Never see the gully sing fence outside. I fi show the youth so them can fly high. Looking at the mirror, transform my life. I the greatest story. I get a youth on the top of the mountain, I the greatest story. Them love show the bad side, the narratives now have no real love for it. But my life I for sure get a youth off to create them glory. Let them judge but not know it. For my flaws let me know sorry. Who did it in the darkness? Nobody. Only the Father above me that watch over me. Me get a chance, make life globally. No sorry. Forgive me haters when I have to see me carry on. I wanna fast to make you go leave to carry on. Name gone at the great book. Look for me, one know how the great look. Never switch, never get shaky for paper. Never sell out, never run out as a cheater. Life is a movie, watch me so the trailer. Doing it big, mama boy, I no failure. Love for me fans and me family, me care for. Misunderstood by most, me no catering. This in the paper, me no sorry. Who did it in the darkness? Nobody. Only the Father above me that watch over me. Me get a chance how we make life globally. No sorry. Forgive me haters when I have to see me carry on. As someone who make the gully have to carry on. Yeah.
All right, so we're going to get started. Well, when I do these slides is because I have ADHD and I have to put my talking points down on paper so that I can read them back to myself and I can remember what I was going to say. As the title says, Unleashing Chaos, the Price of Freedom Without Order. Now, the original title was going to be Why Women Need to Be Held Accountable to the Men, or the men need to hold women accountable to a standard, right? And what I've noticed in these YouTube spaces, and from the time I've been growing up before YouTube, I recognize that there are men that don't want to hold women accountable, and you have to ask, what's the reason why? And oftentimes, a lot of those men either come in the form of the panda bears, the simps, and I call them these treacherous traitors to masculinity. And the reason being is because those men, they're programming the women to be rebellious against traditional values and traditional society. Now, why is that? Why is that a problem? Is because traditional men who set traditional standards dictate the society. In other words, it's their house. It's the king's house. And the king says traditional values. So now when you have men that are rebelling against those values and those core systems and, going against society set or moving based upon what the men are saying of traditional values are saying, they're traitors to masculinity, or they're traitors to that house that man has built. Now, one of the rules of masculinities is if you don't like how that man is running his house, you don't tear down his house, you don't disrespect his house, you just leave it and go start your own thing, right? So we're going to get into it today. Let's go. Historical examples of female accountability declined. Right? Late Roman Empire, right? As Rome became wealthier and more urbanized, traditional roles eroded. Women from elite classes gained significant autonomy in marriage, finance, and law. Sound familiar? Lack of accountability. Divorce becomes easier, especially for women. Female promiscuity and social independence were glamorized among elites, and the women were no longer bound by older Roman customs like manus, legal authority of husband or father. Literally, that's what's going on right now in America. Consequences. Marriage rates plummeted. Birth rates dropped below replacement level. Male authority in the household was weakened, right? So when male authority is weakened in the household and he's not holding that woman up to accountable, because that's part of male authority, This is what happens, right? The Roman military struggled to recruit soldiers from its own population because the women, there's no male authority there to set standards for how the women are to raise the children. See, the women, you know that saying that says when you teach a woman, you teach a nation, but when you teach a man, you teach an individual. Well, how the Nation of Islam uses it, how everybody else uses it now, is to get black men to be ruled over by their women. But when you dissect the context, or you properly break that down, the women are the nation is because they raise the next generation of children. But the men have to be more than an individual because that woman is raising those children based upon the instructions of the man, right? And if the man is not there to hold her to certain standards and accountability, she's going to raise those children based upon her own ideology or ideology she got from somewhere else that goes against traditionalism, like Marxism, feminism, etc., etc., etc. Right? Rome increasingly relied on foreign mercenaries, leading to instability and eventually collapse. Doesn't America have to rely on Chinese and other foreign things to help America keep going? Like a lot of our stuff are made marked in China, right? Weimar Republic, Germany. What happened after World War One? Now these are things I actually looked up and researched. Right? What happened after World War One? Germany entered a liberal, scholar, highly sexualized period. Women gained new rights, including voting, working, and liberal sexual freedom. Sounds familiar? Lack of accountability. The culture celebrated new women who rejected traditional roles. Men who tried to impose boundaries were mocked as old-fashioned. Sounds familiar? Rising divorce and illegitimacy rates. Stepdaddy culture, right? Sound familiar? Fertility rates collapse. Massive male delusionment, fueling movements of extreme nationalism and authoritarism. Rise of Hitler. Many men felt emasculated and betrayed by liberal order. Contemporary America and the West, 1960s, that's when feminism started till now. What happened? The sexual revolution, secular feminism, and no-fault divorce laws led to unprecedented female autonomy and lack of consequences. Lack of accountability. No-fault divorce disproportionately benefits women, who initiate 70 to 80% of the divorces. Child support and family courts overwhelmingly favor mothers. Promiscuity is glamorized while paternity fraud goes largely unpunished. Consequent. Remember, during the Victorian age, or before feminism, if a woman had sex outside of marriage and she got pregnant by another dude, that man was able to divorce her and she didn't get nothing. She was stuck with that child. She didn't get money. She didn't get anything. That was her consequences for violating the marriage contract, right? Consequences. Rise of fatherless homes, especially in black and working class communities. Male disengagement from marriage and fatherhood. MGTOW passport bros. You cannot get mad at MGTOW passport bros, red pill, and these movements when you're transforming the society into a feminized anti-man society. You cannot do that and then expect them to have to deal with that. Now, these men are saying, I am not going to submit to whatever this new age society is. I'm going to go my own way. So, like a lot of you dudes that bang against MGTOW and passport bros, they're not following the current chaotic system or society that we're in today. They're saying, I'm not bowing down to that. I'm gonna go do what I need to do, right? Fertility rates are below replacement in most Western nations. Economic relation instability, social polarization between traditional men and progressive ideologies. A functioning society depends on balance. If only men are held responsible for provision, protection, and leadership, while women are not accountable for loyalty, modesty, and nurturing, imbalance destroys trust, right? Civilization thrives when both sexes have roles, rights, and consequences, right? Now, that don't mean you hold the women to the same standard as the men, but you hold them to a standard nonetheless. It's like a military or army, right? The private doesn't have the same standards as, or held to the same standard as a sergeant. The sergeant is not held to the same standard as a general, right? Because one supersedes the other and one has different responsibilities than the other, right? So you have to give appropriate accountability and standards to based upon what's their function and what's their core responsibilities, right? Civilizations thrive when both sexes have roles, rights, and consequences, right? This is why our society is plummeting right now, because women don't have any standards or consequences for their autonomy, because they're able to be promiscuous and have sex and be irresponsible, creating STDs, making themselves um, lack the ability to create children. You see what I'm saying? Like, come on. We're literally watching how Rome fell in real time. What happens without accountability? When women are not held accountable, men disengage. And when men disengage, civilizations collapse. Without accountability, men stop building, families stop forming, children stop being raised by two-parent homes, empires fall from within, not by war, but by rot. Now, when you say men disengage, right? If I cannot hold my woman accountable to what my standards is, why would I continue to deal with this chick? Because she's not right. It's either now I submit to her rules or I go about my way and find another person that's going to be agreeable to my agenda. You understand? The agenda or the program that I'm running. So the men have every right to disengage. And then the civilizations collapse. Why? Because men are responsible for taming, conquering, and building that civilization. That's our responsibility. So this is why I have pushback on that phrase that say when you teach a man, you teach an individual, but when you teach a woman, you teach a nation. Because it's that man's responsibility to build up that nation and get that nation's standards and structure and guidance. All right. It's not about hating women. It's about loving truth and recognizing that civilizations that overcorrect toward female privilege and immunity always pay a steep generational price. What does that mean? That means that when you give women privilege without consequences and accountability, and you make them immune from the consequences, they're going to do what they want to do with their autonomy. And we see it going on right now. Right? Core reasons. Because unchecked female freedom gives certain men easy access. Now, this is the reason why a lot of the men you see on YouTube are rebelling against traditional men and shaming traditional men from holding women accountable. This is the reason why. Because if you're marketing to men, this is how you get sex from women, and then you're holding the woman to a traditional standard, your game doesn't work because the women are not going to give easy access to sex because you're holding them to a standard where they're keeping themselves chaste. You know what I'm saying? And but we're gonna go into it because unchecked female freedom gives certain men easy access to sex, power, and influence without responsibility. What do I mean by I say that? When you can have when a woman is when you're having sex with a woman, right? And say you don't have sex without condoms, and say she gets pregnant, and now she doesn't require you to give her marriage, you could just dip on that chick, or she could go to the abortion clinic and delete the baby, causing what? Either fatherless home or no more kids being born into the environment, contributing to the declining rate or the birth rates in America. Right? I think there's what 200,000 babies being deleted in per year in the black culture, right? Power and influence, right? The pastor has power and influences over the women in his church. This is why the pastor is able to sleep with the women, sleep with the wives, and even molest the daughters that are in the church because the men are not there to check the pastor and whoop his ass if he does that. You see what I'm saying? Um, and men you have to be held, and men have to be responsible. So now, because traditional standards say, in order for you to get box or get access to a woman in sex, you have to do what? Protect, provide, and be a responsible dude. So now dudes can clap some cheeks, wear basketball shorts. They don't have to present themselves, and go back home and play video games. See what I'm saying? There's no standard for the men to obtain. Now, some of you are going to say, well, that's you being simple. But remember, the Victorian age, the men were the ones who set the standards for that. And the reason behind that was so that to get men to perform, right? They wasn't using the woman as a way to be over the man. Because remember, during the Victorian age, that woman still had to submit to the instructions of that man. But to get access to the box was the reward for the man obtaining this high level of performance. But that woman still had to perform by submitting to the instructions of that man. She had her own duties, right? So the problem in today's society is that women were held to expectation that if you do get this man that's protecting and providing and performing, you have to perform for him. That's what it was in the Victorian age. Today, the women have walked away from that expectation. Right? Let's continue. Who are these men? Right? I talked to y'all about the two patriarchies at war, the tyrannical one and the traditional one. This is the one of them. Elite ruling class. Throughout history, rulers, aristocrats, and now tech billionaires, media moguls, benefit from destabilizing family unit because isolated women equals easier to manipulate, market to, right? Women are easily able to market bullshit to them because they're going to buy that bullshit you market to them, right? You cannot manipulate men so easy because men are going to do the research, and if we recognize that your product is bullshit, we're not going to buy it. Right. So now you have to isolate the women from proper male instruction and leadership to get them to buy and spend money on frivolous shit they don't need. Right. Fatherless children, right, equals more dependent on the state, right, which is communism at the end of the day. Right. So now the state funds state in the form of welfare state, SSI, EBT, WIC, all that welfare, all that stuff. But the problem when you're dependent on the state, it comes with stipulations. The state can say, well, if you're making a certain amount of money, we take away that, take away the money from you, right? Or it can say, well, you can't have a father in your household. You see what I'm saying? So that's what that. Men without legacy equals less rebellion, more compliance, right? Men that have a legacy to protect and sees that there's this tyrant like the guy with the small mustache, they're gonna fight against that tyrant. They're not gonna make that tyrant steamroll over you, right? Because men have a habit to rebel shit in that society that's wrong and chaotic and evil. We have a knack for that, all right? If women break from patriarchy, the state or corporation steps in to replace the father, which is communism. And women are an easy source to manipulate, like I said, to control and get them to do what you want them to do, because women follow trends, right? And without that man, this is why, come to think about it, this is why a lot of groups back in the day during 2013 or 2012, around that time, this is why they marketed hate towards men and pushed more matriarchy instead of patriarchy. The tactic was to get the women, was to pander to the women so that those men can be in charge of those women. You see what I'm saying? Not because and for the purpose of to get the power and influence of the women, right? But what they realized that they still need the men over there to keep the women in check. But you see what I'm saying? So all world leads back to you need the men in your society. But me saying this makes me think about certain groups of people that were those spiritual groups that popped up around 2012, 2013, and they were banging on masculinity and banging on patriarchy, and patriarchy's wrong, and they were promoting female leadership and female rebellion. That's what they were doing. That it was to get access to women, right? Promiscuity, hedonistic men, modern day players, right? They don't want women with standards. Traditional women require commitment, provision, and discipline. Liberal, rebellious women require nothing, just vibes and validation. So these men encourage rebellion because it lowers the sexual marketplace price for them, right? So what's the sexual marketplace or price? The sexual marketplace, because the women control access to sex, is upon them, right? So now the women can say, I need a man to provide and to, I need, my box is going to the man that I marry, right? And the man has to be able to provide, protect, and produce, right? But the balance of that for the men on the men's position is to tell the woman, well, if you want me to do that, then I'm in charge and I'm the boss, right? That's the balance of that. But if the women lower their standards and they're just looking for a quick fuck, and on the premise of rebelling against traditional values, the player or the hedonistic men or the modern day players, they benefit from encouraging women to rebel against traditional society standards or traditional men, which is blasphemy. If I'm going to tell you players this, a lot of players, you preach from the idea of masculinity and rules and masculine structure. If you're in a man's house encouraging the women to rebel against those traditional men, you're out of masculine order, because you're supposed to respect the men's house on how they operate. You're not supposed to teach the women to rebel against them. Just like going to McDonald's and telling the McDonald's employees not to listen to the manager of McDonald's. You're disrespecting that McDonald's. If you don't like how McDonald's is operating, quit that job and find a new job somewhere else, right? Let's get into it. Academics, activists, shit, I cannot say this word. Ideologies. Shit, I gotta fix that. Many male intellectuals and social theorists support feminism, not as a virtue, but because they either want approval from women, hate traditional men, seek chaos to rebuild society in their ideological image. Marxist undertones, right? You have a lot of weak Marxist men that don't like traditional structure. Why? Because traditional structure does not support weaker men, right? In a traditional structure, especially under American capitalism, it dictates that the individual has to go out there and work and fight for what he wants to earn and compete. And you have to be a certain man of certain caliber and certain drive to be able to win into that society, which I don't mind. I'm a Taurus. My zodiac sign is a Taurus. So we don't mind grinding for what we want, right? But a lot of weaker men, they hate that idea. So they often write these books and they use philosophical word salad to basically hate on traditional male structure. So what they do is they preach Marxist ideas and feminism to the women to get the women to rebel against the men, which is dirty macking in essence, right? And they want to destroy this society, America, because remember, America is the empire of the world. I don't give a fuck what nobody say. America has the best pussy. When you throw America's pussy in the air, it shines like a diamond in the sky. And you know it. The problem is that America used to be a lady. Now America has become a whore of Babylon. Let me say that again. And you remember, I said this. Kid Shardy Gaming said this. So if anybody else say it, say that you bring them back to this video. America used to be a lady of traditional standards, protected by traditional patriarchal men. Now America has become a whore of Babylon, trained by weaker rebellious men to get her to rebel. So I'm saying, which is dirty macking, right? Weak men who resent patriarchy. These are men who couldn't compete under traditional masculine systems, which reward strength, honor, and provision and leadership. So instead of rising up, they try to tear down their standard by telling women, you're oppressed, you're the prize, do what you want, right? This gets them temporary validation and access, even though it destroys long-term structure, right? This is why simps, and women know this, simps are not long-term in a relationship, right? You know what I'm saying? Because a simp, a woman is not gonna like the simp is not giving that woman no leadership, and he's a weaker dude. This is why you see on TikTok there's a bunch of panda bears and a lot of dudes pandering to black women. Is because that's the only thing they can do. They can't compete in the traditional man world. They can't rate. They can't do that. So the only thing they got is to pander to black women, and because black women are already trained to hate traditional black men and see traditional black men as toxic, it's easy to pander to them. This is what you see on TikTok right now. A bunch of black men or men in general pandering to, and kissing the ass of black women because that's how they get pussy and validation. Bottom line, men push women to rebel against patriarchy when they stand to gain from its collapse. Whether it's money, sex, power, or revenge. They're not thinking about legacy families or generational consequences. They're thinking about short term advantage, even if the whole society burns in the long run, right? So a lot of these men, they're not thinking about the long term effects. They're thinking about here and now and how it make their dick feel at the moment. So a lot of these dudes, they're not defending masculinity or traditional masculinity. They're defending something else. So y'all gotta be careful about, you know, what guy you're listening to. If they're not pushing traditional standards, they're not pushing for the growth of America, right? Because America is built off of traditional standards and principles fought for by traditional men. That's what I'm saying. So be careful who you listen to, right? Because you have masculinity at its core traits. Remember, masculinity is honest, direct, assertive. Um, I forgot the rest of the traits. It protects, it provides, it produces, right? But they can either fall in the line of traditional rules or some other set of rules, right? You can use your core traits as a man to push to and then define. So it's like the Jedi versus the Sith, right? You have the Force itself, but then you have the Sith that use the Force for darkness, and they put their own religion and ideology towards it. Then you have the Jedi who also use the Force, but they put their own ideology and their own rules of engagement with the Force on it. You understand? But it's just the Force. It's the Force. You know what I'm saying? But the Jedi use their Force how they see it's supposed to be used based upon them, and the Sith use the Force based on how they think it should be used. But it's still the Force in general, right? So that's what masculinity is. That's what femininity is, right? Femininity is a woman that's nurturing. She submits, but she could be a whore or she could be a lady. Same thing with a man, right? Let's go. It's not just women resisting patriarchy. It's men policing and shaming other men for defending it, right? You see that a lot going on YouTube right now. A lot going on TikTok. You see what I'm saying? And it's difficult to tell the difference because they still are standing on masculine principles, masculinity. Like I said earlier, they're just pushing masculinity from a different lens or a different set of rules or principles, right? Here's why it's man versus man over women. Because the game changed, but some men don't want it back. Once women were no longer held to traditional standards, some men thrived in the chaos. No marriage expectations, easy sex with minimal investment, no accountability for fatherhood, no social consequences for exploiting women, right? This is your pastor in your church, right? There's no more men in that church to check the pastor if the pastor fucks your wife or molests your daughter or sleeps with your daughter. Easy sex with minimal investment, right? You don't have to protect or provide or get into a relationship with a woman. You could just smash and dash. No marriage expectations. During the traditional age, you had to be married before you had sex with that woman, right? And some dude is going to say, well, the woman has power with her sex. No, she has power with her sex because she has autonomy, right? You as a man have autonomy too. Why? Because you're the head of the house. You're still the boss, right? If she wants marriage and relationship from you or leadership from you, she has to be the type of woman that you would grant her access to your masculinity to, right? Just like you have to be the type of man for her to grant access to sex from you, sex to her. That's a balance, right? You're still the boss. She still has to follow your program or your organization or your structure, right? She's just putting boundaries on her sex, as she should, just like you should be putting boundaries on your masculinity. I don't know why that's so difficult for niggas in today to do. But the reason being why they're doing that is so that it have easy access to box and whatever else you can get any access from women from, right? So when traditional men step in and challenge that order, the men who benefit from the current dysfunctional feel threatened. That's why they attack you, not the women, because you represent the return of order, and order comes with responsibility, restrictions, and consequences they don't want. I had a thought when I was reading it, and my ADHD made me forget it. Fuck. Oh, give me a moment, see if I can remember it. Um, so you know how I remember the thought now. You know how a lot of player dudes that come on YouTube and they'll call a guy who's being traditional insecure because he doesn't want the women to be promiscuous or for these streets, and they'll say you're insecure because you can't handle a chick that's a hoe or 304 or whatsoever. Well, one can say that the men who are players or they're into open relationships, they're insecure because they can't handle a traditional woman. The logic can work both ways. If I'm insecure because I don't want a promiscuous woman, but you want a promiscuous woman, and the reason why you don't want a promiscuous woman is because the traditional woman, you have to be in a marriage or monogamous situation with that woman. You'd be insecure too because you cannot handle that situation. See what I'm saying? Is which one is it? The same argument you can make that monogamous niggas is insecure is the same argument I can make for niggas into open relationship and say that you guys are insecure too, because you cannot live up to the traditional standard. And the traditional standard is a higher than the open relationship standard. You know why? Because the open relationship standard is the reason why societies before America have failed. You can't argue me that because history proves that to you. I showed you it earlier on in the show. You can't show me any society that when they stepped away from traditional values and principles that they stood to the test of time. We've seen when they walked away from traditional standards and they didn't hold the woman accountable, they all failed. Adam and Eve in the garden is a perfect example. Eve bit the apple. And because Adam didn't check Eve or whatever happened, and she got Adam to eat the apple, what happened to Adam and Eve? They got kicked out the garden. The Bible tells you what happens when women are not held accountable and the men submit to that. It tells you that. Let's continue. Men are fighting over what manhood should be. There are no two competing definitions of manhood. Traditional manhood, honor, provision, leadership, legacy, discipline. Modern simulated manhood, status, sex, access, validation, pleasure, and clout. Right? There is two competing definitions of manhood. How should I rephrase this one? Right? This is my problem when you have these different definitions of what manhood is, because it's subjective, and that's the fucking problem. Because mind you, if you're a man over here, because not wrong if a man wants status and sex access, right? I don't have issues with niggas being players. I have issues when you don't stay in your fucking lane and you want to tear my lane down so your lane can be bigger, or you can eat my food on my plate. That's when I have an issue with a player nigga or a Mac nigga or a pimp nigga. When you step outside your fucking lane and now you want to shame me for how I operate in my fucking house. That's when I have an issue. There should only be one definition of manhood: honor, provision, leadership, legacy, and discipline. Right? But in today you have two competing manhoods where one is saying open relationship, non-monogamy, and that's just how that's how you want to operate. That's what he like doing. That's how he live his life, right? He can still be honorable. He can still be provision. He can still have leadership. He just lacks discipline. And I don't know if your career and legacy being in an open relationship. Maybe you can. I don't know. When you, as a traditional man, say a man is a leader, protector, and builder, and a woman must be accountable to his standards, the other man responds, "You're controlling, you're insecure, you're misogynist." This is how a lot of you men talk when you tell traditional men that they can't hold their women accountable. It's their fucking house and their women. And then now you encourage those women to rebel against those men. Like, where you niggas come from with that? So if I come tell your woman to rebel against you, how would you feel? You know what I'm saying? Why? Because you expose them. You disrupt the comfort they've built in a world with no standards. You force them to either rise up or be revealed. So now we expose who are the men in black culture that was fucking up black culture when it comes to dating and mating, right? Because oftentimes black men get blamed in a general, and we get blamed generally by what the men who are doing what they're not supposed to be doing are doing, right? So now, when you pinpoint who are the men causing the problem, and then now you step to the women and say, "But wait a minute, these type of dudes that y'all fucking with, they're not the majority of black men. Why are you messing with them? What made you choose them over these good dudes?" Now you would have to hold the women accountable to them opening up their box to women that they knew were unworthy, and now you have to hold the actual men accountable for causing the problem in the community, and then now you have to correct that problem, right? Either by casting them out of the community, or yeah, casting them out of the community. See what I'm saying? So now you can't just say, "Oh, it's all black men or black men in general." You have to be specific. Cultural and economic system rewards simp men. The media, music industry, and social platforms uplift men who agree with female rebellion. Galactic feminists, male feminists, beta influencers. Now, let me break that down, right? I have to put my words in proper thought. Um, I had a thought to this. I have to organize it properly. Remember, I have ADHD, so I have to organize a lot of shit that I'm going to say before I say it. Um, for example, in amongst rap and hip hop, right? One of the ways that the men in rap or hip hop teach real women to rebel against men is when they promote, "I'm gonna fuck your wife, I'm gonna fuck your bitch." You know what I'm saying? That's one way, the way they could do it, right? One way they're doing it. You know, when you're preaching in a rap lyric to women who don't have no goddamn sense that it's okay to go on a girls trip, not to listen to your husband, not to listen to your men, not to listen to your good dude, you're also part of the problem too, because you're teaching women to rebel against their house, right? Now, when it comes to the galactic feminists, and male feminists and better influencers, and the galactic feminists, they're the niggas that's on TikTok every day bashing black men or pandering to black women. They're like the Dr. Umar Johnson types. I call them a galactic feminist. I should call them a hotep feminist, to be honest with you. The male feminists and then the beta influencers, right? Men who hold women accountable, they're banned, shadow banned, or ridiculed or villainized. This is what we're doing in a tradition in America built by traditional standards and principles. We're holding men who trying to maintain the house, and there's a reason for that, right? We're telling those men that they're toxic or they're bad people, and they shouldn't be doing what they're doing. You know, there's a reason for that. And to the women, it's a programming. To the women that's going to listen to this, it's a similar program in black culture. If a black man takes a sister out to a date, automatically in her mind he's a sucker. He just took her out on a date to eat. That don't mean he's a sucker, right? Because now if you're a black chick and you disrespect that brother on a date, and he no longer talk to you, you can't talk on him a sucker no more. You see what I'm saying? So just because a dude liked you and he took you out to for a bite to eat on a date to get to know you, before he wants to smash. He could want to smash, but his standard is I want to get to know the chick I'm dealing with before I smash. And he just taking you out for a bite to eat. That don't make him a sucker. Or just maybe that's just his thing. It's just what he do. Right? But in black culture, automatically he's a sucker. You know what I'm saying? So now you have men acting as attack dogs for women. The angry man calls them hyenas, right? Or right for women's dysfunction on payroll for clout or just for proximity to women. Ultimately, that's why these men do it on YouTube. They don't give a fuck about what manhood or masculinity is. They just want access to box because they know it sounds good to women to not hold women accountable to anything, right? And then they'll find that it, that's all it is. You know what I'm saying? The real battle is men who stand on legacy versus men who serve chaos, right? And the moment traditional men speak up, like in the manosphere or the platforms, the chaos class sends their infantrymen who have sold out their own brothers. Every time you see a nigga on these YouTube streets critiquing the black manosphere for holding women accountable, right? The reason why they sold out their own brothers is because you're dirty macking on them to benefit women, right? And you're not critiquing the manosphere because they're mistreating women or they're abusing women. I understand if the black manosphere was abusing women and they were mistreating women or something like that, but they're just holding women accountable, black women accountable. And the reason why black culture is trash is because the men cannot hold black women accountable to anything, right? So you're dirty macking on black men or the black manosphere because they're trying to hold their women of their tribe and their community to a traditional standard. So you sold out your own brothers for that. Anytime you hear a nigga doing that, because you don't even have to bring up the manosphere. If you believe that women should be held accountable, you don't have to bring up the manosphere name. You don't have to use the manosphere at all. You can just say, I don't believe in holding women accountable. The fight to restore accountability, order, and structure starts by confronting not just women's rebellion, but the men who protect it. So the issue is, I want to say, more aligned with the panda bear niggas, the simp niggas, and I want to smash these hoes niggas, because you got to confront and check them. Like, I get it if the dudes who were into promiscuity, into sex culture, into open relationships, I'll be okay with them if they were just pushing their game, pushing what they expect, and they're saying, look, fellas, I'm into open relationship, I'm into non-monogamy. So when you come to my YouTube channel, this is the game that I preach, right? But I don't teach. But if you're a guy and you're into traditional relationships, I'm cool with that too. You live your life. But that's not what they're doing. They're teaching the women to be rebellious towards the men, and then they're shaming traditional men in the same breath, and they're shaming the black manosphere for that in the same breath as well. But then if you shame them, they say, why you player hate? We're living in a world built by traditional men, now being regulated by men who couldn't survive in that same world if it still had rules, right? Unchecked female autonomy plus male cowardice equals societal collapse. I keep telling people, women are intelligent and autonomous and very capable, right? Women can kill you. Women can punch you in the neck. Women can stab you. Women can poison you. Women can line you up and take your life. Exactly. Why boundaries are necessary? Because if you give anyone unlimited freedom with no structure, they don't build, they consume. Not because they're evil, but because it's in the nature of the undisciplined to test the limits. Women are going to test a limit. They're going to test it. And they're already chaotic in their nature. And they're going to test some limits. And if you don't put your boundaries up or hold them accountable to anything and give them consequences, they're going to push it to the limit. And you're seeing women doing it right now. Now, the reason why I'm doing this is so that you can't say You didn't know why American fell and that nobody fucking warned you. Somebody warned you. Somebody stood before what society is pushing now and warned you that this is going to happen if you keep going this direction. So you can't say nobody told you. That's why men as builders and legacy setters must create rules and enforce them, not out of hate, but out of responsibility. Right. Now, when people say the game isn't about the woman, it's about the man, what that means is that the game is about how you, the man, is going to use your knowledge, your wisdom, what you've learned, and what you know, and your identity to go into the game of life and play the game of life and win. So if you're a boxer, you're not going to learn the game of boxing. You're going to put your identity into a gym. You're going to learn how to box with your hands, and then you're not going to go compete. And now you're going to use what you learned in a boxing gym to win a championship in boxing, like a Floyd Mayweather. The game. So the game is about you and how you play it. And what are you going to do to improve your game to get better results, right? So now, how does the woman contribute to a man's game? Because the woman, she's going to help you pass down your legacy and your ideology down to your son and your daughter and your next generation. Right? So this is why the woman is a helpmate and she's supposed to align with your game because she's supposed to help you pass that knowledge down to your son and to your children. Right? So in other words, yeah, basically that, right? So when people say the game is about the man, it's not just it's about you and how you provide that structure, but it's also about how that woman follows your structure too. Right? Um so yeah, that's with that. The irony, simp men in traditional houses. Let's be blunt. These modern men are sitting in a mansion built by traditional masculine order. Marriage laws, plumbing systems, streets, electricity, armies, and they're using it to defend the very rebellion that collapsed it all. It's like sleeping in your father's house and then cursing him for setting rules that built the roof over your head. So you simp niggas that are training the women to rebel against traditional men, this is what you're doing. You're telling those men what they can and cannot do in their house, and hiding behind, well, it's just my opinion. But then, and then if you don't agree with my opinion, you don't have to listen to me. Meanwhile, you're training the women to rebel against those men, and then telling the men you must be secure in yourself to pick women that don't align with your structure. That is the hot load of bullshit right there. I just said something. You're teaching the women to rebel against traditional men. Then you're telling those traditional men you should be secure in picking rebellious, promiscuous hoes that don't align with traditional values and structure. That make any goddamn logical sense? No, it doesn't. Why they hide behind mere responsibility? These men don't actually care about accountability, legacy, and leadership. They care about access to box, female approval, clouts from simping, escaping the pressure of manhood by redefining it as being emotionally available or aligning with female energy. They don't care about what manhood is. They're just hiding behind those things. So they take the language of manhood and twist it into a weapon against men. All right. Final truth. If you don't hold women accountable to your standards, they will default to their own autonomy. And their own standard is whatever the culture allows, which today is chaos, right? The culture allows feminism and promiscuity and debauchery. So because the men cannot hold the women up to a traditional standards, they're going to default to whatever the other influence is pushing them, right? And the biggest barrier to restoring order isn't the women, it's the male traitors who enable rebellion, shame strong leadership, promote emotionalism over structure, mock men who demand legacy and loyalty. They're house pets in a mansion built by lions. That's what they are. then that's a bar for me. Now, are you going to submit to society, or society going to submit to you? What I mean by that, oftentimes when society is going in a direction that you know is destruction, as a man, you have to stand firm and say, am I going to compromise to that chaos, or am I going to stand firm on my principles and move how I think is the best way to move? And it's either society moves with you, or you move without society. So right now, society is not pushing traditionalism. It's pushing chaos. It's pushing promiscuity. It's pushing non-traditionalism. It's pushing hate against men. All right. So a lot of you dudes who say, I don't work with society. Well, you have to check the temperature of what society is saying. Is society saying strong traditional monogamous families, or is society saying promiscuity and rebellion against traditional men? What is it saying? You understand? And the thing is that you have society, then you have the king or the ruler over society, and then you have God. So God dictates the king, and then the king dictates the society. All right. So depending on who the king is, the kings or the rulers or the elites of that society is going to dictate where society goes. And for the past 60 years, it's been liberal men, Marxism, feminism, whatever other progressivism that's been dictating society, right? When these women go to these college institutions, they're teaching a lot of Marxism and feminism in these colleges. This is why a lot of the colleges, they have a lot of holes and 304s in the college campus, because that's what they're pushing. You know what I'm saying? The dividing line between the build a legacy man, the reactor, the compromise man. Society is always trying to pull men into its agenda. And when culture goes left towards disorder, dysfunction, promiscuity, feminism, identity confusion, a man has two options: conform to survive, or stand firm to lead. And a lot of men have chosen to conform to survive. This is why you see a lot of brothers in the Gen Z picking the Instagram model, picking the cooking with Kaya. So cooking with Kaya is a 304. She's just that she's not a big 304. But a lot of black men in black culture, they're picking that because that's what's in their environment. So it's hard to hold the younger generation of black men up to a traditional standard. And you can't do that when you could do that with them, but then you have to hold the women up to a traditional standard too. But that's not what they have. A lot of their mamas were hoes. A lot of women that were raised by hoes, by their mamas who was hoes. So a lot of black men, they're conforming to the Instagram life because that's what's there. That's what a lot of black women are into. Instagram thought, right? True masculinity says, if society is off code, I want to adjust to fit it. I'll set my standard, and anyone who wants in must align. That's a bar for me. Right? Um, the thing is now, what standard are you going to set? I set the traditional standard for myself because this is a value system that has made us strong, and when we walked away from that value system, it made us weak. So I walk by that. So you got to be careful. You got to ask these men, what's your standard? What's your principle? What do you stand on? And you got to say it confidently, proudly, that this is what I stand on. This is what I believe in. All right. This is how you tell what man, what type of man a man is based upon his codes and his standard. All right. Not all traditionalism is good, but when it's God centered, it holds the line. What I mean by when I say that, you have dudes playing subjective semantics with what traditionalism is. So they'll say, when you go back to the days of the Vikings, those were traditionalism. Look how savage those Vikings were. When you go back to the days of Rome and the Greeks, they were traditionalism, and look how debaucherous they were. No, 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 no. When the men talk about traditionalism, they're talking about back in the Victorian age version of traditionalism. Or you could talk about the 1920s version of traditionalism. Or you could talk about the silent generation traditionalism. Or you could talk about the greatest generation of traditionalism. We're not talking about barbaric traditionalism. We're not talking about the Viking traditionalism. We're not talking about the days where knights in medieval time traditionalism. We're talking about traditionalism that came from the past 200 years, I want to say, or from the Victorian age. That's what we're talking about in that context, right? Because that context, those rigid gender roles from that era is why we're successful today. And if we don't maintain that, we're going to collapse like you're seeing right now. If society is pushing traditionalism based on godly principles that hold back chaos, then why not follow that? The key is not tradition for tradition's sake, but tradition rooted in righteous order. Men lead, provide, protect. Women nurture, support, build with men. Children are raised under structure, discipline, and love. God is the head over man. That order is what kept us strong and going. Now that we left that order and those principles, look where we at. That order keeps evil in check. It's not perfect, but it's proven across generations. Nothing is perfect, bro. Nothing is perfect. This is difficult. The path to being a righteous man or woman is a difficult path, but it keeps evil at bay and it keeps those demons at check, in check. You know what I'm saying? Now, all men can live up to that standard, but that's not an excuse to tear it down. See, I don't mind a nigga being a player. I don't mind a nigga living sex culture, open relationship. Stay in your fucking lane. Don't tear down my lane or destroy my lane because so your lane can look bigger and better. And the lane that I'm in, it's my house. So you don't have to tear down my house so that your house can be the one left standing so people can go into your house and buy from you. You know what I'm saying? And here's where a lot of cowardly, bitter, or compromised men show their hand. They don't respect the traditional masculine standard because they can't meet it. So they mock it, attack it, and try to replace it with diluted, self-serving version of manhood. But just because men can't be king doesn't mean he has the right to slander the throne. Bar for me again. Let me just read that to you again. Just because a man can't be king doesn't mean he has the right to slander the throne. And you're absolutely right again. If you can't lead traditional women, then build your own lane, but don't attack men who can't. Don't attack men that setting principles and values for women to follow and who can do it. Don't attack them. Just drive your own lane, right? In a free society, live how you want, but respect the men who live by a code because they're the reasons why the roads still work, the houses stand and good, and the food gets delivered. Don't attack traditional men because that's their code and how they want to live. Just like you want them to respect your code and how you want to live. Because at the end of the day, the traditional men keep the house going. So you keep living your life and being free. All right? Let's continue. The woman chooses, but the man rules his house. The women have the right to choose what man they want to follow, but the man has a right to rule how he sees fit in his domain. This is the balance I'm talking about earlier. Does the woman have the right to choose what man she wants to follow or give her box to? Yes. But the man has a right to rule how he sees fit in his domain. In other words, she can choose, but if she wants to stay in your house, she must submit to that house rules. Simple as that. Doesn't need any explanation. This is a covenant, not chaos. And it's the lack of this understanding that made modern relationships fragile, toxic, and transactional. You don't go to a kingdom and tell the king how to rule. If you don't like the laws, leave the land. Same goes for women, and same goes for weak men. You cannot speak on the code of manhood and masculinity and then disrespect the men and slander the men who want to run their house how the fuck they want to run their house. You cannot do it. This is why I try not to tell dudes on here how to operate. I'm not going to try to tell you what to do and how to do it. All right? I'm not going to go to your channel and tell you this is how you should live. right? Or if I don't agree with how you telling me to live, I just leave your channel. I don't disrupt you. You know what I'm saying? You don't shame the man who builds structure. You thank him, even if you can't live up to it. Because without that man, nobody eats. And any man who uses his voice to inspire rebellion against righteous order is not just dishonoring masculinity. He's undermining the next generation of men and women who need that structure to even survive. Right? So this is why a lot of guys shame you men to being traditional, right? Because they understand that if you're not there to maintain the house, they can't engage in the debauchery that they're engaging in if you leave the house. So they call you out weak. But what they don't understand is that you're training the women to be promiscuous and they don't align with the traditional men. So if the traditional men still pick those women, he's picking a woman that doesn't align with him. Which according to the rules of the game, when a man does not, he's submitting to the woman and not to himself and his instructions. So pick a struggle. Shout out to the angry man. Do you want men who are traditional to submit to the 304s to compromise himself? Or do you want him to stand on his principles or on his codes? And in order for him to do that, you cannot teach the women to rebel against his house, which is what y'all doing. I don't understand. Oh, for a nigga that might see this in the future. But so you traditional men, you get to teach women to be traditional? Yes, nigga, it's their house. Just like telling McDonald's, I can't teach my employees or train my employees to be a McDonald's employees. It's McDonald's and they work there and they're making money and benefit from McDonald's. Anyway, I did a lot of talking and I'm drained. My energy drained. I need to drink some water and go eat something. But I put myself on the big screen. Masculinity is in a crisis. And because the men on YouTube don't want to find a common ground and they're always critiquing the men that you ever find it funny that they only critique the men that hold women accountable? That like they stay doing that. You gotta ask why. Why is holding women accountable a problem to the modern man? You know what I'm saying? And I explained that to you. You got to ask the question to yourself, why is that? You know what I'm saying? But anyway, this was Kid Shorty Gaming Nation. Like, share, subscribe, follow your boy for more content. And I'm out.